They never expected the quiet one to walk away. Not the one who forgave everything, absorbed every blow, and loved them through their lies. But here's the truth no narcissist ever wants to hear. The most dangerous person in the room is the one who says nothing, the one who just stops reacting. Because when a super empath goes silent, it's not out of weakness, it's a warning, a shift, a silent storm brewing beneath the calm. You see, the empath isn't just soft, they're chosen, and when that chosen one has had enough, they don't scream, they rise, quietly, powerfully. In this video, I'm going to show you exactly how the tables turn, how the empath reclaims their power, and how the narcissist ends up facing something they never saw coming, their own reflection. So don't just watch, feel this. Because by the end, you'll see why silence is louder than rage, and why the empath's calm walk away is the final blow. If you've ever been the one who gave too much, this story is for you. Stick around till the end, and if it hits home, drop a comment, or just whisper, "I remember who I am." Subscribe, not for me, but for you. They didn't see the war inside you, because you never showed it. You smiled, even when it hurt. You forgave, when you had every right to walk away. You stayed, hoping love could heal what was breaking you. And they took that as weakness. They saw your softness, and assumed it meant you would never leave, that you would always bend, always break, always come back. But what they never understood is that empaths break silently. You don't scream when it hurts. You go quiet. You shrink yourself. You carry their guilt, their anger, their blame, as if it's yours. You protect them, even from the truth. Because you're not just loving, you're loyal. Loyal to a fault. And that's what nearly destroyed you. You tried to explain, tried to be seen, tried to show them who you are, the depth of your heart, the beauty of your soul, the endless ways you poured yourself out just to make them feel whole. But every time you spoke up, they twisted your words. Every time you asked for something, even a little bit of love, they made you feel like a burden, like you were too emotional, too needy, too sensitive. You learned to apologize for feelings you never should have had to shrink. You tiptoed around their moods like broken glass, adjusting your tone, your truth, your very essence just to avoid another outburst, another cold silence, another invisible punishment. And still, they called you unstable. They mocked your tears. They compared you to others. They gaslighted you until you started questioning everything, your memories, your instincts, your reality. You became a version of yourself that you no longer recognized. Smaller, quieter, tired, so very tired. But you told yourself it would get better, that if you just held on a little longer, they'd finally see you, love you, choose you, and that hope, that false hope, became the chain you wore like jewelry. You stopped sleeping, stopped laughing, stopped doing the things that made your spirit feel alive, because all your energy went into surviving them, reading their moods, anticipating their reactions, trying to earn what should have been given freely: love, safety, respect. You suffered in silence. No one knew, because no one sees the scars left by emotional abuse, the bruises on your self-worth, the wounds in your heart. You were the strong one, remember, the healer, the too nice, so you kept pretending, until pretending became your prison. Until even you forgot what peace felt like. And the worst part, you still defended them. Even when they hurt you, you still found reasons to stay. They had a rough childhood. They didn't mean it. Maybe I overreacted. You excused the inexcusable. Because somewhere deep down, you believed their love had to be earned. That you had to prove yourself worthy. That if you could just love them hard enough, they'd finally become the person you dreamed they were. But empaths, chosen ones, we are dreamers. We see the potential. We see the light even in people who only bring darkness. We don't fall in love with who they are. We fall in love with who they could be. And that's the trap. That's how we stay too long, give too much, lose ourselves in people who were never capable of holding us. You were drained, emotionally, mentally, even physically. Your body started to feel it. The anxiety, the tight chest, the racing thoughts. And still, you smiled. Still showed up. Still tried. You broke your own heart over and over, just to keep someone else whole. But deep down, there was a whisper. A tiny, trembling voice that kept asking, "What about me?" And for the longest time, you ignored it. Because loving them felt more important than saving yourself. Until it did, and single quotes until the silence became unbearable. Until the loneliness, while standing next to someone, felt worse than being alone. until your soul started screaming through the silence. And for the first time, you listened. You saw the truth. They never loved you, not because you're unlovable, but because they can't. Narcissists don't love. They use, they perform, they extract, they survive off your light, because they have none of their own. And once that light starts dimming, they discard you, replace you, or worse, keep you on the shelf. Just close enough to drain, but never close enough to truly connect. That realization, it shattered something inside you, but it also awakened something powerful. The realization that you were never the problem. You were the supply, and they knew it from the beginning. Your kindness was their playground, your empathy, their weapon, and now you're done. You don't need closure. You don't need them to understand. You don't need them to feel sorry. You only need you, and that's the beginning of the shift. That's where the silent struggle ends, and the quiet power begins. Because now, you're not trying to be heard. You're just walking away. No announcements, no arguments, just peace. And in that, peace is everything they never expected. Silence, distance, freedom. You're no longer afraid of losing them, because you've finally found yourself. And that is what breaks them. It doesn't happen loudly. There's no big argument, no slammed doors, no dramatic exit. That's the thing about empaths. When they finally break, it's not with rage, it's with stillness. A calm so deep, so unfamiliar, it even surprises them. The breaking point isn't when they cry, they've cried before. It's not when they beg, they've done that too. It's when they stop trying, stop explaining, stop caring about being understood. That's the shift. It's subtle, invisible to the narcissist at first. Because narcissists don't notice silence until it starts costing them something. But inside the empath, everything is changing. This is the moment when the heart finally stops waiting for an apology that will never come. When the soul finally whispers, "I'm done bleeding for someone who keeps stabbing." It doesn't come from hate. It doesn't even come from anger. It comes from emptiness. A numb, hollow realization that no matter how much love you give, it will never reach them, never touch them. Because they're not open. They're not capable. And more importantly, they never wanted to change. They just wanted control. And for so long, you gave them that, not out of weakness, but out of hope. You believed in their potential. You saw the good beneath the cruelty. You kept reaching for that sliver of light you swore existed behind their cold eyes. But that hope, it became your poison. It kept you chained to the illusion. It blinded you to the truth, that you were pouring your soul into a black hole and calling it love. And now you see it. Not because they said something new. They never changed their script. Not because they finally crossed a line, they've crossed so many. But because something inside you just turned off. Like a switch. No more explaining. No more defending your heart. No more fighting to be seen by someone who only sees themselves. You reach a moment when their silence stops hurting, because now, it's peaceful. You stop checking your phone. You stop rereading the messages. You stop caring how they'll twist your words. And in that silence, in that sacred pause, you feel something return to you. Yourself, your energy, your clarity, your fire. At first, it's just a flicker, a thought, a question. What if I'm not crazy? What if it really was emotional abuse? What if I didn't deserve any of it? And the moment you allow those thoughts in, something shifts. Your body, which was once tense around them, begins to breathe again. Your mind, once foggy and confused, starts connecting the dots. And your heart, your beautiful, bruised heart, starts beating for you again. You realize you've been living in survival mode, walking on eggshells, carrying their pain while ignoring your own. You gave second chances to someone who used every one of them to get smarter at hurting you. And suddenly, it's not about revenge. It's not about making them see what they did. You don't need their apology. You don't need them to change. Because now, you're changing quietly, gracefully, powerfully. You don't announce it. You don't warn them. You just detach. Emotionally, spiritually, energetically. You stop reacting. Stop feeding their need for chaos. You stop defending your truth to someone who never wanted to hear it. And that silence, it drives them insane. Because narcissists thrive on reaction. They need your tears, your anger, your begging. It feeds their illusion of power. But now, you give them nothing. Just peace. Just distance. Just a smile they no longer have access to. And they feel it. The energy is gone. The control slips. The supply is cut off. And you, the one they underestimated, become their greatest loss. But they'll never admit that. They'll pretend they don't care. They'll smear your name, twist the story, and paint themselves the victim. But deep down, they know. They know they lost the one person who loved them purely. The one who tried, who stayed, who believed. And nothing they chase next will ever feel the same. Because you weren't just love, you were light. A light they'll spend the rest of their lives trying to replace, never realizing it was their own darkness that dimmed it. And you're not broken. You're reborn. Wiser, stronger, quieter. You no longer fight to prove your worth. You embody it. You no longer crave their validation. You give it to yourself. You no longer chase love. You attract peace. That's the moment of shift. That's when the table turns. Not when you slam the door, but when you finally stop opening it. Not with words, but with silence. Not with hate, but with indifference. You walk away, not to hurt them, but to heal yourself. And that, right there, is what breaks them. Not your tears, not your anger, but the fact that you're no longer available, no longer reactive, no longer interested. You become untouchable, unbothered, unreachable. Because now, you're protecting your energy. You've remembered who you are. Not their victim, not their fixer, not their emotional sponge, but a chosen one. And chosen ones don't beg to stay in broken places. They rise, they ascend, they walk away even with trembling legs, because their soul knows staying would be self-betrayal. So if you've felt that quiet shift inside you, if your heart has gone still, not in defeat, but in resolve, trust it. That's not weakness, that's evolution. The breaking point isn't the end. It's the beginning of your comeback, the return to your light, the moment you stop surviving and start living. And that silence, that's not empty. It's full of power, full of truth, full of you. Something changes the moment the empath stops reaching outward and starts reaching inward. That's the true beginning of the rise, the moment they realize they were never weak, just misused, never powerless, just too forgiving. And once that mirror turns inward, everything begins to shift. Quietly, steadily, the same heart that once broke for others begins to beat for itself again. The same soul that once bent to keep the peace starts standing tall in its own truth. And the empath, now awakened, now wiser, begins to remember who they are. Not a people pleaser, not a fixer, not someone who exists to carry the weight of everyone else's wounds. No, they are more. They are chosen. They are light. They are energy in its purest form. The kind of energy narcissists try to bottle, manipulate, and consume. But the chosen one doesn't stay in the pit. They rise. Not because someone lifts them, but because they choose to rise. And that choice, it's everything. Because when the empath has had enough, when they've seen the cycles, heard the lies, and felt the pain, they stop looking for justice from the narcissist. They stop waiting for closure, or explanations, or apologies that were never coming. Instead, they begin the sacred work of self-rescue. It doesn't look grand at first. It's small, quiet, choosing to say no without guilt, choosing to rest without apologizing, choosing to speak the truth, even if their voice shakes, choosing to walk away from anything that dimmed their light. Day by day, they gather the fragments of themselves, the narcissists scattered, the pieces of joy, of self, of dreams once dismissed as too much, and with shaking hands, they begin to rebuild. They start by doing something that once felt impossible. They believe themselves. They stop gaslighting their own intuition. They stop second-guessing what they feel. They look back and finally see the truth of what they went through, not a misunderstanding. Not a bad phase, but emotional abuse, manipulation, control, and the shame that once lived in their chest begins to loosen its grip, because they realize it was never their fault. They didn't break because they were fragile. They broke because they kept carrying what wasn't theirs to hold. And with that realization comes power, pure, soul-deep, unshakable power. The kind that doesn't need to prove anything to anyone. The kind that doesn't beg, doesn't chase, doesn't explain. The chosen one starts showing up differently. There's a calm in their voice now, a stillness in their eyes. They no longer react to bait, no longer engage in the games. And the narcissist feels it. They feel the shift in energy, the loss of control, the collapse of the illusion they built around the empath. Because the empath is no longer their mirror, no longer their supply, no longer the emotional puppet they could pull strings on. This inner transformation is more than healing. It's spiritual. Divine. The chosen one begins to operate on a different frequency, Their spirit expands. Their discernment sharpens. They begin to recognize the same toxic patterns in others, not years later, but instantly. And instead of diving in to rescue, they step back. They choose peace. They choose solitude. They choose themselves. For the first time in a long time, they are unavailable. Unavailable to emotional vampires. Unavailable to chaos. Unavailable to drama disguised as love. And it's not bitterness. It's boundaries. Not coldness, but clarity. They no longer need external permission to rest, to leave, to say no. They've learned that real love doesn't confuse, doesn't hurt, doesn't steal your sense of self. Real love is safe, consistent, nurturing. And until they find that they're happy walking alone, the world begins to reflect their shift. They attract different people, different energy. The ones who come now, they don't want to take, they want to build, to honor, to grow together. Because when the chosen one heals, they become a magnet, not for those who need fixing, but for those who are whole enough to walk beside them. And even when the narcissist tries to return, and they always do, the chosen one doesn't flinch. There's no temptation, no curiosity, no longing for the past, because they're not the same person anymore. That version of them, the one who tolerated the bare minimum, the one who begged for love, doesn't exist anymore. What stands now is someone rebuilt from the ashes, someone who knows their worth on a cellular level, someone who doesn't need closure because they've created their own. And the narcissist, they feel the loss, not of the person, but of the control, the access, the supply. They realize too late that they never had your love, they only had your fear, your wounds, your hope, and all of that is gone now. And what's left? A chosen one on a mission, not to prove themselves to anyone, but to live fully, freely, authentically. This is the rise, this is the return, this is the rebirth, and it's quiet, peaceful, sacred. No revenge needed, no performance, just presence. You show up, and your energy speaks for itself. You walk into a room, and your boundaries do the talking. You speak your truth, and you're not afraid of who walks away, because you know what's meant for you will never require you to lose yourself again. The rise of the chosen one isn't loud, it's not messy. It doesn't come with fireworks. It comes with peace, with purpose, with power. The kind of power no narcissist can touch, because it was never theirs to begin with. It was always yours. And now you remember. Welcome back. You never needed to become more. You only needed to remember who you were all along. They don't see it coming. Not at first. Because narcissists live in a world where they believe they are the center. And you're just an extension of that world. Someone orbiting their ego. Someone predictable, controllable. For so long, you gave them the reaction they craved. The tears, the confusion, the apologies. Even when you were the one hurting. They fed on your emotional chaos like it was oxygen. Every breakdown you had made them feel taller, more in control, more important. They mistook your pain for proof that they mattered. They believed your silence meant you were afraid, that your kindness meant you were weak, that your loyalty meant they owned you. So when you shift, when you no longer react, no longer argue, no longer explain yourself, they can't compute it. It doesn't fit the story in their head. And suddenly, the narcissist is standing in the middle of the stage. Spotlight on, but you're gone. No more audience. No more applause. No more energy to feed on. And that's when it hits them. Not emotionally. No, they don't feel the way you feel. But they notice the absence. The supply is missing. The control is slipping. The familiar script isn't working anymore. They test you, of course. A little jab here. A little guilt there. Maybe a fake apology wrapped in manipulation. I miss you. No one understands me like you do. We had something special, didn't we? But your energy no longer bends. You don't respond the same way. Your eyes no longer light up for their empty words. Your heart no longer jumps at their breadcrumb affection. And that confuses them deeply. You see, narcissists aren't used to losing. Not like this. Not quietly. They're used to slamming doors and playing the victim. They're used to you coming back. But now, you're calm, distant, unbothered. And that calmness feels like a storm to them, because it's a power they can't touch. It's a boundary they can't manipulate. It's silence that screams, you're no longer in control. At first, they'll try harder. The love bombing returns. They may shower you with attention, act like they've changed, say all the right things. But watch closely, the energy is wrong. It's not love. It's panic, desperation. Not because they miss you, but because they missed the version of themselves they were when they had control over you. When that doesn't work, the confusion turns into frustration. Now they're angry. Now they're cold again. The insults come back. The gaslighting intensifies. You've changed. You're heartless. You think you're better than me now? But even that doesn't land anymore. You've risen. Their words slide off you like rain on armor, and the narcissist begins to spiral. Not because you're cruel, but because you're indifferent. You see, narcissists can handle your love. They can handle your hate, but they cannot handle your indifference. They don't know what to do when you're no longer emotionally available, when your energy is no longer theirs to steal. That's when the mask begins to slip. That's when they start revealing what they truly are. Not powerful, not mysterious, not untouchable, but empty, lost, childish. And they try to replace you, of course. They move on fast. Post photos, pretend they're happy, show off their new supply. But even in their performance, they're checking to see if you're watching. Every post, every story, it's a question. Are you still under my spell? And when they don't get a reaction, when you remain silent, at peace, grounded, they unravel. Because no matter who comes next, no one gives them what you gave. No one holds the mirror like you did. No one loved them through the darkness, the way you tried to. You weren't just supply, you were home. And they destroyed it, believing they could always return. But the locks have changed, the lights are off, and the door, it's closed for good. Their confusion turns into obsession. They analyze you now, watch you, stalk your energy. They may not reach out directly, but they're there, lurking, trying to decode how you went from broken to glowing, from crying to calm, from begging to vanishing. They don't understand that while they were focused on control, you were focused on healing. While they were playing games, you were building strength. While they were feeding off your energy, you were learning how to protect it. This confuses them the most. How someone they underestimated, someone they thought they broke, is now untouchable, unreachable, unshaken. And that confusion doesn't just bruise their ego. It threatens their identity, because narcissists live in illusion. They create stories where they are always the hero, the victim, or the one in power. But your healing, your rise, it contradicts their entire fantasy. And so, they panic, quietly, behind closed doors. They may never admit it. They'll lie, pretend, blame. But deep down they feel it. They've lost something they'll never replace. Because they didn't just lose you. They lost access to your light, your empathy, your energy. And no matter how many people they cycle through, no one will glow like you glowed, but you. You're no longer focused on what they think. You don't need revenge. You don't need them to understand. Because your peace is the proof. Your silence is the answer. Your growth is the justice. And that is what confuses them the most. How someone so emotional, so soft, so sensitive, became so powerful. But they never understood that sensitivity was never weakness. It was depth. It was love. It was a gift they never valued. And now, it's gone. Let them be confused. Let them chase illusions. Let them drown in the silence they created. You don't need to explain. You don't need to return. You only need to continue rising. Because once a chosen one awakens, they never go back. It's not always loud. In fact, it's so quiet that the narcissist doesn't even notice it at first. The moment the empath stops reacting is like the first breeze before a storm. Subtle, almost unnoticeable, but deeply significant, because that's where it all begins. The shift, the turning of tides, the rewiring of power. For so long, the narcissist had control, not because they were strong, but because the empath kept giving away their energy, reacting, explaining, pleading, apologizing, hoping. Every single emotional response was a spark they used to keep their false sense of superiority burning. They knew exactly which words would break you, which silences would terrify you, which twisted logic would confuse you into submission. It was a cycle, a sick dance between the giver and the taker. But suddenly, it stops. The empath no longer flinches, no longer fumbles to defend their innocence, no longer reaches for connection with someone who only ever used it as a weapon. At first, the narcissist mistakes it for passivity. They think they've won, that their manipulation has finally worked so well, the empath has simply shut down. But what they don't realize is that silence isn't submission, it's separation. The empath is detaching, reclaiming every ounce of energy they once poured into that toxic dynamic. And that detachment, it's sacred, it's powerful, it's the beginning of their rise, and the narcissist's slow fall. Because narcissists survive on reaction, on chaos, on emotional confusion. They throw darts just to see if you'll bleed. They say cruel things not because they believe them, but because they know you'll defend yourself, and in that defense they feel control. But when you stop reacting, when their cruel words land and bounce back without a single tear, a single reply, a single emotional flicker, it unravels them. Suddenly, the narcissist is standing in a room filled with silence, and they realize that the only sound they hear is their own emptiness echoing back. The empath begins to glow differently. Their energy, once drained, begins to return in waves, not because someone gave it back, but because they finally stopped giving it away. They pull their attention inward, towards healing, towards peace, towards self. They start noticing things they once ignored, the way their body used to tense around the narcissist's presence, the anxiety before every phone call, the guilt that lingered even after doing everything right. They recognize it now for what it was: emotional slavery, a constant performance to avoid punishment and earn fake affection. And now that the mask is off, now that they're no longer reacting, they see it all clearly. The narcissist, on the other hand, begins to disintegrate, slowly, quietly, not in public, not at first, but internally. They can't understand what's changed. They go through the same motions, play the same mind games, press the same buttons, but nothing is working. Their puppet isn't dancing anymore. The emotional leash they once yanked with ease is now hanging loose, untouched. They feel powerless, irrelevant, unseen, and for someone who builds their entire identity on control, that is terrifying. They begin to panic, but not the way most people panic. Narcissists panic in layers. First through blame, you've changed. Then through guilt, I did everything for you. Then, through anger, you're ungrateful. And finally, through desperation, you'll regret this. But the empath doesn't bite, doesn't respond, doesn't even feel the need to defend anymore. Because when you've seen the truth, when you've finally pulled your soul out of the trap, you don't argue with the one who built it. You just leave it behind. And this shift in energy is what breaks the narcissist's illusion. You no longer seek closure, no longer check if they've changed, no longer believe their future-faking promises. You understand now that they never loved you. They loved what they could take from you. And that clarity becomes your shield. It protects you from re-entry, from emotional relapse, from going back just to see if the poison still tastes the same. It does. Meanwhile, the narcissist scrambles. They try to replace you quickly, hoping to recreate the supply. They mimic the love bombing, the attention, the fantasy. But it doesn't land the same. Because there's a certain light an awakened empath carries that cannot be faked, cannot be recreated. It's the light of someone who gave everything and survived. Someone who shattered and rebuilt themselves from dust. Someone who has nothing left to prove. Because they finally know their worth, and now protect it with silence. The narcissist starts to feel that silence like a weight, like a punishment, like rejection. But it's not. It's just a boundary, a long overdue, soul-saving boundary. And that's the greatest irony. The empath never wanted revenge, never wanted to destroy them. All they ever wanted was connection, safety, truth. But when they realized it would never come, they chose peace instead. And peace, to a narcissist, is the worst kind of loss, because it means you've moved on without them, grown without them, healed without their validation, lived without their chaos. You stop reacting, and they start falling, not because you won, but because you withdrew your energy, your attention, your soul, thought the very thing they fed on. You took it back, and now, they're left with themselves, the one person they've been running from their whole lives. No more distractions, no more mirrors, no more illusions, just them, and their emptiness. And you're not watching, you're not waiting, you're not hoping they get it, because, now you know, your job was never to teach them, it was to remember you. This is the shift, the energetic flip, the turning point, where the empath becomes untouchable. No revenge, no anger, just light, just truth, just freedom. And the narcissist. They may never understand what happened, but you do. You took your power back. And that is the beginning of everything. At first, they feel nothing. That's the curse of the narcissist. They're so used to wearing masks, they no longer recognize their own face. They've spent so many years projecting, pretending, performing, that the line between reality and illusion is no longer clear. So when the empath leaves, when the supply is gone, when the reactions stop, when the chaos collapses into silence, they don't feel the loss immediately. They feel confusion, inconvenience, ego bruised, not heartbroken. They're so disconnected from their authentic self that even their pain comes delayed. Because it was survival mode. It's learning to breathe again without guilt, to trust again without fear, to love yourself with the same intensity you once reserved for someone who never deserved it. And the more you heal, the less they recognize you, no longer triggered by their tactics. You're no longer seeking validation in the spaces that starved you. You don't explain your absence. You don't defend your boundaries. You simply are. And your presence, you're grounded, healed, intentional. Presence speaks louder than any argument ever could. You don't need revenge when your peace is that loud. They'll feel the silence in places they never expected. In their ego, in their routine, in their games. They'll try the same strategies with new people and find they no longer work the same way. They'll replay old conversations in their head, wondering how they lost control. They'll stalk your glow from a distance, unsure whether to hate you or admire you. And in that confusion, they begin to crack. Because for the first time, you are not accessible, not emotionally, not mentally, not spiritually. You've returned to yourself. And that, to a narcissist, is the deepest loss because they never knew how to connect with your soul. They only knew how to control your mind. But now, your mind is clear, your spirit is protected, and your silence has become your sword. This is the power of the silent revenge. It's not about causing pain. It's about refusing to be in pain anymore. It's about healing in such a way that you don't need to prove anything. You don't need the last word. You don't need to be understood by someone who was never listening. You understand yourself now. You trust yourself now. You love yourself now. They won't say it, but they'll feel it. Every time their manipulation fails. Every time they reach and find nothing. Every time they hear your name and realize they can't touch you anymore. They'll feel it in the silence you left behind. In the dignity you now walk with. In the way you don't try to prove you've moved on. Because you truly have. They'll replay everything. Not because they miss you. Narcissists don't miss people. They miss control. But because they finally see what they lost. They remember your warmth, your depth, your consistency. They remember the way your eyes held hope, even when they gave you reasons not to. They remember how you showed up fully, completely. And now, no one does. They traded a soul for an ego trip. And now they sit with that choice. Alone, that is the weight of the silent revenge. It doesn't slam the door. It simply walks away and locks it behind. It doesn't destroy the narcissist. It forces them to destroy themselves with their own patterns, their own emptiness, their own choices. And while they spiral, you evolve, you create, you rest, you reconnect with friends you lost touch with. You read books that nourish your mind. You sit in sunlight and feel it again. You hear your own laughter and recognize it. You look in the mirror and instead of asking, "What's wrong with me?" you whisper, "Welcome back." You begin living again, authentically, fearlessly, not looking over your shoulder, not wondering what they think, because you no longer live in the prison they built for your mind. You've broken the spell. You've reclaimed your power. And now, you love differently. You love yourself first. You trust your intuition. You honor your boundaries like sacred lines in the sand. You no longer carry people who refuse to walk. You no longer shrink yourself to fit into anyone's broken expectations. You take up space. You speak truth. You radiate. This is the part they never saw coming. That you wouldn't just survive, you would ascend. No drama. No revenge plots. Just distance. Just healing. Just power. That's the silent revenge. And it's louder than any scream ever could be. You never noticed it at first. How they leaned in just a little too hard on your kindness. How they took just a little more than they gave. How, every time you showed up with your light, they quietly began to pull from it. At first, it seemed subtle, natural, a little emotional fatigue after speaking with them. A strange anxiety that crept in before their calls. The way your laughter began to fade without explanation. You thought it was you. Maybe you're just tired. Maybe you're too sensitive. Maybe if you loved harder, gave more, they'd be happy, and you'd finally feel peace again. But that peace never came. Because what you were dealing with wasn't just emotional confusion. It was energetic theft. Narcissists don't just manipulate words. They manipulate energy. It's how they survive. They're not creators. They attach themselves to people who shine brightly. Empaths, givers, lovers, and then slowly begin to siphon that light to feed their own emptiness. You didn't fall in love with a narcissist. You fell in love with a reflection of your own light, mirrored back at you in the beginning, only so they could gain your trust. The charm, The intensity, the deep connection you thought was real, was a carefully constructed illusion designed to pull you in and open your energetic vault. And once you were in deep, they started feeding. It doesn't happen all at once. Narcissists are strategic. They don't take your energy in a single blow. They take it drip by drip, like a slow pour of soul withdrawal. It starts with subtle guilt, little jabs, confusing comments, silent treatments, withholding affection when you need it most. Praise turned to criticism. The smile that once felt like home becomes a weapon, a tool used to control your behavior. And you, being the empath, the peacemaker, the lover, you start working harder to fix what you didn't break. You pour more, try more, give more, but nothing is ever enough. That's the game, the energy drain. You give more hoping they'll finally feel secure enough to love you right. But they don't want secure. They want access. Constant, unfiltered access to your light. Your emotional reactions are like fuel to them. Your joy, your anger, your tears, your forgiveness. Every drop becomes a meal. Your pain makes them feel powerful. Your emotional confusion makes them feel in control. And they will stir the pot just to keep your energy moving toward them. That's the part they don't tell you. Narcissists don't feed on love. They feed on emotion. All of it. The higher the volume, the sweeter the supply. You'll find yourself emotionally exhausted and spiritually hollow, wondering where all your joy went. You'll second-guess your every move, walk on eggshells, filter your words, apologize for things you didn't do, all because they've built a silent system where you are always on trial, and they are always the judge. You never know what will set them off. You never know what mood they'll be in. But you do know one thing. You are always the one adjusting, always the one shrinking, always the one compensating. Meanwhile, they stay the same. Cool, detached, calculating. They're never really present with you. Because they're not with you, they're feeding from you. That's why the connection feels intense but hollow. They can mimic empathy, mimic love, mimic passion, but there's always something missing. Depth, presence, safety. You feel like you're holding the relationship together with emotional duct tape, while they just float above it all, taking what they need, leaving you depleted and confused. And the worst part, you blame yourself. That's what the energy drain does. It convinces you that you're the broken one, that you're too sensitive, that you expect too much, that your boundaries are the problem. But the truth is, your light was never the problem. It was the target, and they saw it the moment you walked in. Your empathy, your softness, your deep desire to connect. That's what drew them in, and what they began draining the moment you let them close. You'll notice it most in your nervous system. That tightness in your chest, that constant state of anxiety, that inability to relax even when nothing's wrong. Your body always waiting, watching, bracing. That's not love. That's trauma bonding. That's the body's response to energetic warfare. Because being connected to a narcissist isn't just mentally exhausting, it's spiritually dangerous. Your soul knows when it's being siphoned. The more you try to love them, the more they feed. Not because they want your love, but because they want your reaction, your fire, your light, and even your pain. Especially your pain. Because in your pain, they see their power. You break, and they feel tall. You cry, and they feel wanted. You beg, and they feel adored. That's the twisted dynamic. You give everything, hoping they'll see your heart. But they never look at your heart. They look at your weakness, and they exploit it, until one day, you feel empty, numb, like a shell of yourself. The laugh you used to love no longer lives in your throat. The dreams you held close now feel like distant fantasies. You look in the mirror and don't recognize your own eyes. And that's when the truth whispers, this is not love. This is consumption. They haven't been loving you. They've been feeding on you. And the only way to survive is to cut the cord, not with anger, not with revenge, but with clarity, with silence, with distance. You starve them of reaction. You give them nothing, because that's how you begin to heal. You stop pouring into a vessel that only leaks. You stop giving CPR to a connection that was designed to suffocate you. The healing isn't immediate. You'll feel the withdrawal, the confusion, the ache. That's the grief of your spirit reclaiming what was stolen. But with each day, your energy begins to return. Slowly, gently. You begin to laugh again, not because someone told a joke, but because joy returns to your bones. You sleep deeper. You breathe easier. The color returns to your world. And one day, the version of you that used to shrink for love no longer exists. That's the power they didn't expect. That the same heart they tried to break would become stronger. That the same light they tried to dim would grow brighter. That the same empath they drained would become someone they can no longer touch. Because once you see the game, you never play it again. You learn that love doesn't drain. Love restores. Love protects. Love doesn't ask you to suffer so someone else can shine. You are not too much. You are simply too radiant for someone who only survives in shadows. So, now, you protect your light. You don't dim it, you guard it. You don't beg for love, you embody it. And next they'll search for another source, another light, another empath to drain. But you'll be long gone, full, glowing, untouchable. Because now, you know the truth. And your energy belongs to you. Forever. They didn't just take your energy, they took your identity. Piece by piece, quietly, skillfully, like a thief in the night. Not stealing objects, but essence. At first it looked like admiration. They copied your quirks, your style, your way of speaking. The songs you loved became their new favorites. Your words came out of their mouth. Your mannerisms echoed in their body language. They mirrored you so well, you thought it was connection. You thought, wow, we're so aligned. But you weren't aligned. You were being studied. And every time you let them in, every time you revealed another beautiful part of yourself, they took it. Narcissists don't build an identity from within. They assemble one from the people they target. Especially empaths. Especially those with rare, radiant energy. You were never just someone they loved. You were a blueprint. A living, breathing example of depth of humanity. Softness, presence. And because they had none of it naturally, they decided to borrow it, steal it, wear it like a costume. And at first, it flattered you. You felt seen, reflected, understood. You didn't realize they were slowly replacing you with your own reflection. It sounds dramatic, doesn't it? But if you've lived it, you know exactly what I mean. You started noticing how you became quieter. While they became louder, you became unsure. While they grew bolder, they picked up your beliefs, your insights, your values, and started preaching them back to you like they were theirs. Like they were the wise ones. Like they were the healer. They began to perform your personality, even as you began to disappear. You were fading, emotionally, spiritually. While they stepped into the shell you left behind. That's the sickest part of the energy drain. It doesn't just leave you empty. It leaves you feeling erased, forgotten, replaced. They made you feel like you were too emotional, then turned around and shared your deepest thoughts on social media as if they originated them. They gaslit your instincts, then used those same instincts to impress someone new. They mocked your softness, then wore that softness when they wanted to look innocent. They told you to be quiet, then stole your voice. And when you started pulling away, when you began reclaiming pieces of yourself, when you found your voice again, they didn't apologize. No, they accused you of changing, of becoming cold, of losing yourself, as if they weren't the ones who drained you. They play the victim while wearing your skin. This is why the aftermath of a relationship with a narcissist feels so deeply violating. It's not just heartbreak, it's identity theft. It's spiritual robbery. You're left looking at someone who is now performing you and getting praise for it. Admiration, attention. People tell them how wise they are, how kind, how deep, and inside, you want to scream. That's me. That's who I was before they broke me. But no one sees that. No one saw the slow dismantling, the erosion, the way your opinions were chipped away until you doubted yourself, the way your light dimmed while theirs grew brighter from feeding off you. The public sees the mask. You saw the monster behind it, and you're left with questions. Who am I now? If they took everything I gave, what's left of me? That's the grief no one talks about. Not just the loss of a relationship, but the loss of yourself. You don't just need to heal from what they did, you need to remember who you were before they started imitating you. But here's the truth, what they stole wasn't real. It looked like you, sounded like you, moved like you, but it wasn't you. It was only a reflection, a surface-level copy, and copies fade, performances end. What's real always remains. Beneath the exhaustion, beneath the confusion, beneath the trauma, you're still there. And that's why they fear your healing. That's why they dread your comeback. Because when you reclaim what's yours, your voice, your essence, your fire, they're left with nothing but the echo of what they tried to become. They don't know how to create. They only know how to steal. And without you, their mask starts to crumble. People begin to see. The charm thins. The inconsistencies surface. The stories stop making sense. Because without your energy animating them, they're hollow. And the worst part for them, watching you come alive again, watching you rise from the ashes of the version they thought they destroyed, watching you glow, not because of them, but in spite of them. That's when the karmic mirror sharpens. That's when the guilt creeps in, not always consciously, but energetically. They feel the void again, the emptiness, the hunger, because their identity wasn't real, it was borrowed. And now the source is gone. So take your time, empath. Grieve the loss, mourn what was taken. But don't ever believe that you are truly gone. You are not lost. You are not forgotten. You are becoming again. Every journal, entry, every boundary, every breath you take without apologizing is you reclaiming your light. And this time, you don't share it with those who feed you, protect it. You learn to spot the mimics, the mirrors, the hollow ones, who only want your glow but never offer their own. You walk with discernment, with quiet power, and you no longer give your identity away for scraps of attention. Because now you know. Your soul is not a costume, your truth is not a trend, and your light is unrepeatable. They can try to become you, but they'll never be you. Ever there comes a moment, after the storm, after the silence, after the breakdown, after the tearing away, when you suddenly realize you're still here. Maybe you're standing quietly, bruised but breathing. Maybe you're crawling forward, unsure of who you are anymore. But one thing is certain, you survived. And that survival is no small thing. Because what you went through wasn't just heartbreak. It was soul fracture. It was war. A spiritual war where you didn't even realize you were the battleground. A war where your love, your light, your giving heart were used as weapons against you. And yet, here you are. This is the beginning of the return. Not to who you were before, but to who you've always been underneath it all. The version of you that was never broken, only buried. The version that doesn't shrink for love. That doesn't explain their softness. That doesn't question their worth. This version was there the whole time. Watching, waiting, whispering, come home. And now, you do. The return to self doesn't begin with fireworks. It begins in stillness. In the quiet moments where you no longer chase. Where you stop refreshing their feed. Rereading old messages. Replaying old scenes. It starts when you stop explaining your pain to people who benefit from your confusion. When you stop asking for closure from someone who closed their heart long before the relationship ended. That's when something clicks. You don't need their validation to move forward. You just need your own permission. And so, you start again. You start walking without looking back. You start laughing again. Not for anyone, not to make anyone stay, but because joy is rising in you once more. You start eating, sleeping, breathing, for yourself. You reclaim the small things first. The morning routines. The songs you stopped listening to because they reminded you of them. The boundaries you stopped setting because you were afraid of being too much. You take them all back, slowly, gently, like someone rebuilding a house after a fire, one brick at a time. With more intention than ever before. You begin to notice your own patterns too. How easily you gave. How often you ignored your gut. How you labeled your intuition as overthinking. How you apologized just to keep peace in places that were never peaceful. And you don't judge yourself. You forgive yourself. That's part of the return. You stop beating yourself up for not knowing. You honor the version of you that did the best they could with what they had, and you love them fully. This is the rise the narcissist never saw coming. Because they believed their silence would destroy you. That their absence would hollow you out. That their smear campaign would define you. But you turned the volume down on the noise. And turned inward. And in that silence, you heard yourself again. You started making decisions without fear. You began trusting your boundaries. You started asking yourself, what do I need? And then actually listening. And that's when the power comes. The power isn't loud. It's not performative. It doesn't announce itself. It becomes the power lives in your presence. In the way you no longer explain why you left. In the way you walk away from what drains you without guilt. In the way your no becomes sacred. You no longer fear losing people because you've already lost the one person who taught you that. Self-abandonment isn't worth anyone's love. You become untouchable, not because you've closed your heart, but because you've opened your eyes. You see clearly now. You know what manipulation feels like. You recognize love bombing when it shows up. Dressed like devotion. You notice when people are trying to extract instead of connect, and you don't try to fix them anymore. You don't pour yourself into empty cups, hoping they'll hold you back. You let them go, not with anger, but with grace. That's the difference now. The healed empath doesn't seek revenge. They seek alignment. They don't want to be proven right. They want to be at peace. They don't want to win anyone back. They want to win themselves back. And they do. Day by day. Choice by choice. They come home to themselves. To their body. Their truth. Their softness. Their power. Who become someone new. Someone familiar but stronger. Someone who still loves deeply, but doesn't tolerate disrespect. Someone who still believes in people, but doesn't ignore patterns. Someone who still gives, but from overflow, not depletion. You are not bitter, you are wise. You are not cold, you are discerning. You are not hard, you are protected. And yes, the narcissist will notice. They always do. Because once you stop leaking energy, they feel it. Their feeding ground is gone. Their puppet has cut the strings. And no matter how many times they try to hover, to test, to lure you back, they find a different person standing there. Someone they can no longer manipulate. Someone who doesn't flinch at their silence. Someone who doesn't fear being misunderstood anymore. Someone who knows peace is more valuable than being right. This is the final transformation. This is the return to self. You love differently now, not less, just wiser. You speak to yourself more kindly. You no longer search for safety in someone else's chaos. You recognize that your sensitivity is a gift, not a flaw. That your depth is not weakness, but your most sacred power. You stop dimming your light. You stop editing your truth. You walk boldly, and anyone who can't handle that simply doesn't walk beside you. You become someone who can stand alone, not because they want to, but because they can. And from that place of fullness, you attract people who see you. People who don't just love what you offer, they love who you are. People who match your energy, not just consume it. That's the beauty of becoming untouchable. You no longer chase love, you embody it. And real ones, they feel that. So let this be your reminder. You are not who they said you were. You are not weak. You are not broken. You are not hard to love. You are powerful. You are sacred. You are whole. And anyone who cannot meet you there doesn't belong near your light. Welcome home. Empath, you're not just healing anymore. You are risen. You are untouchable. If you're still here, listening, then you already know this isn't just a story about pain. It's a story about rebirth. About finding yourself again beneath all the noise, beneath all the trauma, beneath all the ways you were told you weren't enough. You came here looking for answers. Maybe for closure, maybe just for someone to say, you're not crazy. And let me tell you this, from my soul to yours, you are not crazy. You were never too much. You were just placed in the hands of someone who could never hold someone like you. You didn't lose yourself. You were just hidden under survival mode, under the weight of someone else's projection, under the guilt they handed you every time they couldn't face themselves. They didn't love you, not because you were unlovable, but because they didn't know how to love anyone, not even themselves. They only knew how to take, how to perform, how to imitate connection while avoiding the real thing. You were the real thing, and they didn't know what to do with real. You were soft in a world that rewards hardness. You were forgiving in a relationship that counted on your tolerance. You were love, living and breathing, in front of someone who could only mirror it back temporarily, and then punish you for having it at all. But none of that was your fault. Let that sink in. None of it. You were not naive. You were not weak. You were hopeful. You believed in their potential. You believed in the good you thought you saw. You believed that if you loved hard enough, held on tight enough, stayed patient long enough, that maybe, just maybe, they'd meet you there. But healing is not about waiting for someone else to catch up. Healing is when you finally realize you've waited long enough. This journey wasn't about revenge. It was about return. A return to yourself. A remembering of the girl who used to laugh freely. Of the boy who used to dream big. Of the soul that once moved through life unafraid. You are not broken. You are becoming. And becoming takes time. It takes quiet. It takes solitude. It takes grief. It takes courage to sit with your own silence and not run back just because it hurts. And look at you. You did it. You stayed. You faced it. You felt it. That is strength beyond words. I want you to take a breath right now. A real one. The kind that fills your chest with air, with presence, with peace. Because you're still standing. Still healing. Still glowing. You are the story they never saw coming. The one who survived without closure. The one who walked away without revenge. The one who chose peace over chaos. That takes power. That takes alignment. That takes soul. Yes, it still hurts sometimes. Yes, the memories creep in at night. Yes, there are days where the what-ifs get loud. That's okay. Healing isn't linear. Some days you'll feel free, others you'll feel fragile. But even in the fragile moments, you are not who you were. You're wiser now. Softer, but stronger. More guarded, but more grounded. You know what red flags feel like now. You know what self-abandonment tastes like. And most importantly, you know the sound of your own voice again. Keep listening to that voice. Keep choosing yourself. Not in a selfish way, in a sacred one. Because your energy is sacred. Your peace is sacred. Your time, your boundaries, your intuition, they are all sacred. And from now on, you don't explain your sacredness to people who only see your softness as a place to land and feed. There's a world waiting for the healed version of you. A version that loves without leaking. A version that protects without closing. A version that dances again. Not for validation, but for joy. That version is being built right now. With every step you take. With every truth you speak. With every lie you no longer believe. That version of you isn't just coming, it's here. Rising from the ashes of every silent goodbye. Every ignored red flag. Every apology you gave just to keep the peace. You don't need to prove anything anymore. Not to them. Not to the world. Not even to yourself. You existing as you are is enough. You breathing with intention. You showing up with softness. You setting boundaries with a shaky voice but firm heart. That is enough. Let them wonder. Let them spin stories about you. Let them create versions of you that help them sleep at night. You don't need to correct the narrative. You don't need to fight for the truth. Because the real ones, they'll feel your energy. They'll see your light. They'll know your heart. No explanation needed. And as for the ones who drained you, discarded you, underestimated you, bless them and let them go. Their karma is their own mirror. Their punishment is the distance between who they are and who they pretend to be. You don't have to watch that story unfold. You're no longer in that chapter. You are writing something new now. One page at a time. One boundary at a time. One healed breath at a time. And this time, the story isn't about surviving them. It's about choosing you. Over and over again. So if no one told you today, I see you. I'm proud of you. And I promise, your softness is your power. Your empathy is your strength. Your story is not over. It's just beginning. And this time, it's on your terms. No more chasing. No more explaining. No more shrinking. More performing. Just you. In your truth. In your wholeness. In your light. Because the real revenge was never about hurting them. It was always about healing you. And you're doing it. Keep going.